On this edition of the program, for the first time ever, a presidential ticket interviewed. Chase Oliver and Mike ter Maat of the Libertarian Ticket. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for June 21st, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas. Now, we've done a lot on this program. We have began humbly as just me, a braying jackass on the internet, talking to you, anybody who would listen. We have traveled to the front lines of campaigns. And indeed, only a few weeks ago, we were at the Libertarian Convention. But we've never done what we're about to do right now, and that is talk to two candidates that will be on the ballot for the vast majority of all the Americans that are listening to this right now. That is the Libertarian Ticket, Chase Oliver and Mike ter Maat. Let's go ahead and get into it. It is our great pleasure on the Politics program to welcome the Libertarian Ticket for 2024, Chase Oliver and Mike ter Maat. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be with you.
And just for audio listeners, Chase, if you could introduce yourself just so people can tell the voices apart.
Yeah, my name is Chase Oliver. I'm the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States, 38 years old from Atlanta, Georgia.
There we go. And Mike, if you could introduce yourself.
Well, thanks very much. It's Mike ter Maat. I'm just as tickled as can be to be Chase's running mate, representing as the vice presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party.
All right. Well, let's get started. Chase, you made a lot of headlines when you ran in the Georgia senatorial race in 2022. In fact, I think I ran into you while you were outside of the first Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker debate, because I was there covering that as well. What did you learn from that race that has informed your campaign for president now?
Well, that was the only Herschel Walker versus Raphael Warnock debate, because Herschel Walker didn't show up to the second debate. I did. But it did, that experience did inform me on what it's like to run an outsized campaign where you're going to be outspent, with the resources of the two-party system, but still being able to punch above your weight, having an outsized impact, and really showing the state and ultimately the country what libertarianism is all about. And we look forward to shaking up the two-party system, being a true disruptor ticket, and somewhere that voters who are dissatisfied with the two parties can come to. And I think I learned a lot in my Senate race, and every time I run, there's things that I learn to do better. And we're firing on all cylinders here at the Oliver ter Maat campaign.
Well, I do want to get into your strategy, and we're going to spend the bulk of our conversation talking about that. But before we do, I was at the Libertarian Convention where you guys got nominated, although I got on a plane before you actually got the nod because that took some doing. So let me ask you this. What is your relationship with the National Party? Chase, I'll start with you, but then Mike, I want to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, well, personally, I'm a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party. I've been very, very closely connected to the National Party for years as somebody who's been a federal candidate. And I try to forge great relationships with everyone on the board. I made sure to reach out to each and every member as they were elected, congratulating them. And, I also participate in the national politics of my party as a delegate to the National Convention. I've been that for the last three conventions now. And so I try to have a great relationship with our LNC. The door is always open for me. And I'm ready to reach out to them and see what we can do for things like ballot access in states that need it, help find down ticket candidates that we can support and bring out voters for. And so I'm really looking forward to working with the National Party, but also state affiliates all over the country.
Mike?
Thanks. Just like Chase, I've run for Congress in the past. He ran for Congress before he ran for Senate, which your viewers will be interested in knowing about as well. And I participated in county leadership when I used to live in Florida. I am also a lifetime member of the LP. Have been member and registered Libertarian, a member of the LP for over a dozen years. And so in that sense, I think Chase and I have both been in and around the party for a long time and played a lot of roles. We are forming a bit of a unity ticket here in the sense that we come from different caucuses, you might say, inside the Libertarian Party, but our positions align, so closely on so many issues that we're able to represent the full spectrum of libertarian thought fairly successfully, I think.
Let me just have one more question on this, and then we can move on. There does seem to be an adversarial relationship between your ascendancy to get the nomination and one of the largest caucuses within the Libertarian Party, one that does have the chair of the party as they were reelected over that LP weekend. Does that hinder your ability to run for president, Chase?
No, because I think our campaign is one that is a welcoming campaign that can have anybody from any caucus come in the door. In fact, we have members of every caucus working on our campaign as volunteers, working in the higher levels, and advising this campaign. So when I was elected, I recognized that there were people in the room who were not picking me as their first choice or even their second choice on down the line. And so I came up to the stage with my arm extended, ready to work with people, ready to extend my hand. And that's all I can do. All I can do is be saying I'm ready and willing to be a partner to anybody within the Libertarian Party, and hope that folks can see my sincerity to do this, sincerity to grow our party foundation up, to make sure that we have a party that is functioning and ready to challenge Republicans and Democrats into the next generation. And so I hope it doesn't hinder my ability to work with anybody. I try to not collectively judge anybody. I try to judge people as individuals and not as a monolith. And that includes people who are members of certain caucuses, regardless of where they came from.
Mike, do you think that it hurts your guys' ability to get votes that the chair of the party and the Mises caucus have been adversarial to you guys?
I don't think that they're adversarial at this point. You're right. There was a little bit of a disappointment for some people in the party that they didn't get their favorite candidate. But, that always happens, right? I think that Chase has done a good job of bringing the party together. Certainly, I personally am a member of the caucus you're referring to, and so I'm able to bridge that gap in our ticket. All the full range of libertarianism is represented. So I think that we've turned that corner.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the campaign itself. Chase, what is the strategy to increase your vote count that is historically garnered by the Libertarian Party? There was another party's nominee that was at your convention mocking a 3% vote total that is actually larger than what national vote totals have come in for Libertarian parties in the past. What is your strategy to reverse that?
So first, I think, the reason why that stuck in his craw is because Joe Jorgensen beat the spread in so many states, and he feels like if there wasn't a libertarian, those votes would have magically become Republican votes. Safe to say that he's a mistake in that assumption. Most people would have stayed home because they wouldn't have felt represented. So it's important to have that alternative on the ballot. But what are we doing to garner more votes than in the past? Well, one of the things we're doing is reaching out to the next generation of voters. My campaign did a survey of libertarians asking them to identify when they became a libertarian. And the plurality was 18 to 29-year-olds, and then seconded by under 18-year-olds. And so we're going to be reaching out to the next generation of libertarians and trying to activate them with the issues that matter to them, particularly the anti-war issue that so many people who are on college campuses, or well, they're on summer break now, but were on college campuses recently protesting and will be again in September if nothing changes. It's reaching out to those young people who see the cost of living increasing, where they're going to the grocery store every 2 weeks and they're seeing less and less filling up the cart with the same amount of money. And that's an inflationary impact that's caused by us spending trillions of dollars more each year in our economy than we're bringing in as a government. And that results in inflation that's harming every single American, but really those who are just getting started in the economy right now. And it speaks to having an energy and enthusiasm that is very different. I hate to use the identity politics of age sometimes, but when you see a real contrast when not even just Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but even all the other independent candidates are over the age of 70. And you have me, who's actually grown up in the war on terror years, who just got started in the economy and watched the bailouts for banks happen while individuals got screwed over and the mortgage market went underneath due to government interference. I think it speaks to the fact that millennials, Gen Xers even, have been completely bypassed by politicians of the past, and that the same politicians in Washington, D.C., who are pulling the levers of power now were doing that when I was in high school. So I think there's definite reason for us to be reaching out to these younger voters to give them something to vote for, not just something to vote against as a protest vote, and to really speak that it's time for our generation to really start speaking up. And, and that is nothing to saying against those libertarians who've been in the trenches for years and years and years. They've been fighting this fight for a long time, and they're ready to see new blood come into the party. They're ready to see a new generation of activists come into the party who are going to be out there in the streets, knocking on doors, doing text banking and phone banking to continue the legacy that David Nolan started in his living room in Colorado. We want to continue that legacy for more and more young people as time goes on. I'm happy to be pushing that message forward and bringing in some new blood to the party.
Mike, what do you think the most effective strategy to increase vote count is?
I think it's going to be just like Chase said, staying on our message, talking a lot about peace. Chase has been a long-term, very credible and very effective peace activist. I think a lot of youngsters and a lot of folks in my generation too will come along with us, feeling like they have been cheated by the Democratic Party, unrepresented by the Republican Party. More Americans than ever before are waking up to the idea that our foreign policy does not align with their values, and by the way, doesn't work, doesn't make us safer, doesn't make us wealthier. I think people are going to give us a real hard look just based on the reality of their values aligning with ours.
Well, let's dig down a little bit here, because obviously the Libertarian Party as a leading third party option, while you were going to activate a lot of people that would otherwise not vote, as you pointed out, Chase, there is a runoff and you are trying to present a contrast between both parties. So let's take them one at a time. What is the biggest issue in this election that disaffected Democrat voters will like to hear from your ticket?
Well, I think, it speaks to my history in the Democratic Party that I came to the Libertarian Party from being a Democrat, and that was because they failed the last anti-war moment that we had in this country. And I think it will be very important to many voters on the Democratic side of the aisle that someone is speaking to the anti-war movement of today, which is opposing the war in Gaza, asking for a ceasefire now, actually asking for a demilitarization of our foreign policy on the whole completely in exchange for actual diplomacy. I think that can bring a lot of disaffected Democrats into the tent, seconded only by our immigration policy, where they have been, for now decades, Democrats have been asking for real comprehensive reform in this area, and the can has been continuously kicked down the road. I think our radical change from the status quo to the Ellis Island model is something that can be very attractive to Democratic voters. And, here's the biggest thing. I think the biggest thing we have to get across to Democratic voters is that many times our personal values might align with theirs. We just don't think that government is the best way to achieve the goals they want to achieve, and I think most people want to achieve. We want to see people having great health care. We don't think the government is the best people to facilitate those solutions. We want to see solutions, to our environment so that we have clean air and clean water and a better planet to live in for our kids and grandkids. But we just don't believe the government and central planning is the best way to fix those issues. So the best thing we can do to Democratic voters is listen to them as to what's important to them and actually recognize that the solutions that are best capable of fixing those problems that they identify are done outside of the scope of government.
Mike, I'll get to you in a second, but Chase, if I could follow up, when you say the Ellis Island model, what does that mean specifically in 2024?
Yeah, so basically all I ask is that if you want to come to this country to work and to contribute to our economy, that you come through a port of entry to declare who you are. So that way we can know if, if you're sick and carrying a disease that we don't want to be shared, that's less likely than somebody who might be wanted for a crime that requires us to exercise our extradition treaties that we do have with other nations. And if someone feels like they're being unfairly prosecuted for those crimes, they can then claim asylum. We can go through that process. But for 99.9% of people, they will just come through, be seen as the peaceful people that they are, and allowed to come into the economy and get to work. This also allows for the movement across the border back over for, say, agricultural workers who need to come here during planting and harvesting season, but can then take their money back home to their families and have a much better quality of life than the status quo immigration system we have right now.
Mike, what do you believe is the biggest issue that disaffected Democratic voters? We'll be happy to hear from you guys.
Well, I think that war and peace is the big one, just like Chase put his finger on. The other thing is that we need to recognize that people are disaffected from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and independents based on a whole raft of economic issues. Everyone, irrespective of which party you're in or what age group you're in, and to a certain extent, irrespective of your financial situation, has been hammered by inflation. This is in our wheelhouse in the sense that we're the only party talking about really fundamentally changing our monetary policy, changing the way that we end up with inflation, not just, rearranging the deck chairs, right? It's not a matter of just changing who is the head of the Federal Reserve System or who's the President of the United States or who's the Treasury Secretary. We need to fundamentally change how much money we allow to be printed and how much money we allow the federal government to spend.
Chase, let's flip it on over to the Republicans. If you are a disaffected Republican voter listening to you right now, what do you think is the issue that you can most saliently say you deserve their vote for?
Well, I would like to say it would be the economic issues, the fact that we're actually serious about being fiscally responsible, lowering taxes, enabling entrepreneurship. So there's a whole host of economic issues that I think would be extremely attractive to the Republican Party, in terms of just being, fiscally sane and stop printing trillions of dollars, creating that inflation that Mike's talking about, but also unleashing the power of the small business in this country by reducing the regulatory red tape, removing subsidies and giveaways that only benefit large businesses and instead just lower the cost of business overall so that we have a truly competitive free market. I think those are things that should be extremely attractive to traditional Republican voters. And I also think it's our duty to remind these Republican voters that it was a Republican president who enabled Anthony Fauci, the NIH, the big healthcare community within the government, to shut down this country, to lock us down, to close hundreds of thousands of businesses that never came back, to create stress and strain for hundreds of thousands, if not millions more small businesses who are still trying to recover from the inflationary and the labor impacts and the supply chain interruptions. And so I think it's important for us to not only recognize that we have the best fiscal policy, the best policy on economics, but that the last president who was a Republican ran the tab up on the debt and deficit and had horribly mismanaged this last crisis that we had in a way that really did not benefit our economy, small businesses, or families across this country.
Mike, your message to Republicans.
I think that most Republicans recognize that the Libertarian Party better aligns with the way they feel about how the COVID regime was managed, the idea that the government should have the authority to shut down your business, that the government would have the stupidity to shut down your business, the way that vaccines were shoved down our throats, the way that the government, as it turns out, was not completely honest with us, that hid information, that took steps to censor what was allowed to be said in social media, for example. These are all things that should bother every American, but as we all know, has fallen squarely into the wheelhouse of many concerns of many Republicans.
This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Head on over there right now. If you want to support a program that travels all over the country, sometimes the world, to cover politics for you, interviews the people that are going to be on the ballot, well, only one place to do it, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. We'll get to the benefits in a second. Let's get to the news first. Bobby Kennedy Jr. did not qualify for the upcoming presidential debate next week. That, according to CNN, to do so would have meant that he had to secure 15% in 4 national polls, meeting CNN standards, and to achieve ballot access in 270 electoral votes. The first is legit as a reason why he's not on there. The second's kind of boo-boo. We'll get to it. Kennedy met the polling requirements in 3 out of those 4 polls, or rather, he only had 3. He didn't get 4. And right now, he is only approved to be on the ballot in states totaling 89 electoral votes. All right, here's why that's BS. Trump and Biden don't have 270 ballot access. However, a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate do have 270 vote ballot access, and they are the presumptive nominees of their parties. The only reason why this is a thing right now is because we've never had a debate this early. The Commission on Presidential Debates is not involved. This is a private affair with CNN. And so, while it is true that Bobby Kennedy only has 3 polls that have him at 15%, if he had gotten to 4, this would have been a more interesting question, but he couldn't get to 4. In fact, his number has been dropping nationally for the last couple months. The Kennedy campaign will make a big fit about this, and to be totally honest, what I hope they do is spin it into some kind of event on television somewhere, because that's what they really want, is mind share, and that's going to be the only way that they get it. By the way, there still is a possibility that Bobby could be on the September 10th debate. That will be hosted by ABC, although their qualification standards have not been released yet. We assume that it's going to be something more than 3 polls at 15%, or maybe more recent polls that are at that level. Meanwhile, the last independent candidate to participate in a presidential debate was H. Ross Perot in 1992. Justice Neil Gorsuch criticized the Supreme Court's majority decision against Delilah Guadalupe Diaz, a drug trafficking defendant, arguing that it grants excessive prosecutional power. Diaz appealed her conviction for importing methamphetamine across the U.S. southern border, asserting that she was unaware of the drugs in her car. Her appeal claimed that federal evidence rules were violated when prosecutors allowed an expert witness to testify that most drug couriers know that they are bringing illegal substances over the border. A 6-3 decision rejected Diaz's appeal, with Justice Clarence Thomas' majority opinion supported by both liberal and conservative justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson and Chief Justice John Roberts. But Gorsuch, siding with the criminal defendants as he has previously, contended that expert testimony was inadmissible and criticized the decision for giving prosecutors undue power, arguing that allowing experts to generalize about the mental state of defendants without directly addressing the defendant's mindset violates federal evidence rules. The case hinged on a rule prohibiting experts from stating opinions about a defendant's mental state, but Thomas maintained that the testimony was permissible since it referred to drug traffickers generally, not Diaz specifically. Gorsuch disagreed, calling it a charade and questioning its basic legal rules. I wanted to add this just because we have yet to hear the Supreme Court ruling on Trump immunity. This is likely coming in the next week, and when it does, it will bring along with it a crescendo to the build of anti-conservative Supreme Court justice stories that have been building up. And before we get to that, I just want to let all of folks who are listening to me know that on the Supreme Court, these very partisan decisions are not the only decisions. And indeed, jurisprudence is something that oftentimes transcends political lines. So, eat your vegetables, because next week it's going to be nothing but cotton candy and Mountain Dew when it comes to partisan bickering. One last story here. Federal agents raided the home of my old hometown, Oakland, Mayor Sheng Tao on Thursday morning, according to the Department of Justice, witnesses, and reports from local media. Tao is facing a recall vote amid a wave of crime and municipal fiscal challenges. FBI agents were heard banging on the mayor's door around 6 a.m. said a neighbor to Politico. Waking up the quiet street, Tao was escorted out of her home by agents. Meanwhile, spokesperson Cameron Pollan in the FBI San Francisco office confirmed that the Bureau is conducting a, quote, court-authorized law enforcement activity on Maiden Lane, but did not provide further details. As of 9:30 this morning, as I'm recording this on Thursday, FBI agents were still on site at Tao's Maiden Lane home. It is not clear what has prompted the raid. Tao and her staff did not immediately return requests for comment, and the Department of Justice confirmed federal agents were at Tao's home, but declined to comment further. The Oakland mayor is under intense scrutiny in recent months for the city's crime rates and the departure of the Oakland A's baseball team. She will face a recall vote in November after her detractors collected enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. Let me say, as I say every time that I talk publicly about the place where I spent nearly a decade, I love Oakland. Oakland is one of my favorite places in the world. I had an amazing time while living there, and I do believe that it is one of the most beautiful, temperate, open-hearted places on the planet. And when I say that about the people, I have to be honest when I say that the government of Oakland charitably leaves something to be desired. Chang Tao has been a controversial figure. And whatever this is, and whatever the recall will bring, is hopefully going to bring something better for Oakland, the town. You know, I love it. Salute to Lake Merritt. That is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Head on over there right now. Support independent journalism. For $3, you get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. If you would buy me a cup of coffee once a week, so I could sit in your car, on your commute, or run next to you on the treadmill, or in your neighborhood, or just do dishes next to you while I talked politics, just 1 cup of coffee each week, then you deserve 4 episodes, not 2, which is what you get for free. Head on over there right now. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Now back to Chase Oliver and Mike ter Maat. Obviously, you guys are out there trying to get as many votes as possible, and I wish you luck in that. The legacy of third-party campaigns often is that there is one issue that winds up breaking through into a national conversation and often can affect politics for years, if not decades, to come. Is there one issue that you guys have that you want to make sure, say it up top, say it in the middle, and say it a few times at the end, that everybody who's listening to you walks away with?
Well, I don't think there's just one, but I'll give you one that I think if we can push the Overton window in the right direction, I think will make our community safer and make ultimately each and every individual in this country safer, which is ending the federal war on drugs and the way it's prosecuted. Much of the violence we see in our cities and we see in our neighborhoods is due to that war on drugs. It's due to the fact that we've given a black market to cartels to have a profit motive, to produce drugs and to create crime in our streets. And what we really need to be doing is readdressing this issue from an entirely different point of view than the drug war crackdown model that we've had for a long period of time. And ultimately, this will help us address issues like the fentanyl and opioid crisis that we've seen in our country. Because when we start treating addiction as a medical crisis and not as a criminal justice throw people in prison kind of crisis, I think we can actually start properly addressing the issue, start addressing the underlying issues of addiction, and really start looking for better ways for people to use if they're going to, but also provide avenues to give people help if they're needing it, and reducing the need for criminality around this industry and around this use, which is not, if we're fighting a war on drugs, let's be real, drugs won it a long time ago, and no amount of government intervention is going to make that better. It's only going to create more crime, more violence. And we need to seriously readdress the way we look at these issues. And I'm just happy to say we just saw the governor of Maryland expunge 174,000 cannabis convictions in his state. I encourage the other 49 governors to follow suit. And I think the next hill we have to climb is to remove the criminalization around therapies like psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine therapies, which have shown to be remarkably beneficial for mental health outcomes, including for things like PTSD that many people suffer from. I think it's really wrong that veterans who suffer from PTSD can't get the therapy they want just because it's a controlled substance on a list that bureaucrats have decided, as opposed to doctors picking the best medicine to be able to treat their patients.
To follow up on that, how do you think that issue has changed over the last 5 to 7 years, where we've seen a rise in district attorneys that have not wanted to charge drug crimes in the same way? Some of them have been recalled in cities, especially on the West Coast, and you've seen decriminalization efforts go into place in places like Portland that have since been rescinded. Do you think that this issue is more complicated than, say, it was in the 90s and 2000s from a libertarian perspective?
Well, I think honestly, it's just a perfect example that very many times you govern in you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. The devil's in the details, and that's going to be required by each local jurisdiction to find out what works best for them. But the best thing the federal government can do is be hands off when it comes to how local governments address the issues of decriminalization and ending the war on drugs. And personally, I understand that this is a complicated issue. It's not something that just happens overnight. But there are success stories, and you can look no further than the nation of Portugal, which had the highest IV drug use in all of Western Europe. And because they changed from a crackdown model to a decriminalization model, they have fixed many of the social issues that were facing them. And they weren't doing it by throwing lots of Portuguese people into jail. They were doing it by helping people get into rehab beds instead of prison beds. They were doing that by allowing for people to test their drugs at a pharmacy, so that way there were less overdoses. If we did that right now, we'd be saving a lot of lives, because a lot of these kids who are dying of fentanyl overdoses, they think they're taking a Xanax. They think they're taking a different drug, but it's actually spiked with fentanyl. They could go to a pharmacy and test those out. We could save a lot of lives through overdose. So I understand it's not black and white, but there's lots and lots of areas where we can fix this issue in terms of harm reduction, and in terms of changing the policy from a criminal justice model to a public health model.
Mike, if there's one issue that you could move the Overton window on with this campaign, what is it?
Chase has got it exactly right. Take it from a former police officer. The war on drugs, as a practical matter, just doesn't work. I've got an ethical problem, and so does Chase, have an ethical problem with telling people you are not allowed to do with your body as you should see fit. But set aside the ethical arguments just for a moment. As a practical matter, as an empirical matter, we know that the war on drugs just doesn't work. I have performed CPR on many a young person, to Chase's point, who is caught up in addiction, who didn't realize the drug that they were taking. These are all the results of markets not working properly because we drive underground all of these transactions. Our war on drugs has made the world less safe, more dangerous, and is costing us lives. If you're serious about helping young people and others get out from underneath addiction and keep them safe, you've got to sunset the war on drugs.
Well, let me give you the same follow-up, Mike, that I gave Chase, because as a former police officer, you certainly will have an educated view on this. What is that line between enforcement and district attorneys that are not charging for, let's say, things that are unrelated, like burglary laws, but voters look at as saying that, well, if drug use is allowed, then this is just increasing lawlessness? What would you say in terms of somebody who has enforced the law and hopefully had people that rightfully should go to jail stay in jail?
Well, there are a lot of people who do a lot of stupid things for which they need to go to jail. There's no question about that. Using a drug just ain't one of them. We need methods, and I spend a lot of time talking about law enforcement reform. We need methods to require, to force, to impose our community's values on our law enforcement structure, whether that is, the police officers and the police agencies, or the prosecutors, whether they're elected or appointed. These people need to act on our feelings as members of the community, our values, our principles. We have a right to come together and create a criminal code to keep us safe. No one should be excusing violence. No one should be excusing burglaries or other felonies that encroach on our rights. No one's talking about that. If you're standing down from prosecuting things that are really hurting people, shame on you. You got to get your act together. But don't use, the popularity at any one moment in time of ending the war on drugs as an excuse. We ought to be able to walk and chew gum. We should not be prosecuting people's drug use. We should absolutely be prosecuting violent crime.
I think you guys have an opportunity there because right now both parties are entrenched in positions that are, in many ways unpopular, and something that is beyond the very 90s 2000s idea of ending the war on drugs, that has more of a idea of, hey, let's also understand what the rule of law is and that there are crimes that do need to be prosecuted. That I think is a broadly popular position, at least as I've seen it play out.
Well, I
Absolutely.
think you're probably right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can even address other issues in the criminal justice platform without removing the ability for us to enforce laws and protect people from things like force, fraud, coercion, theft, and violence. These are the fundamental building blocks of civil liberties. If government is empowered to do anything, it's to protect us from those encroachments upon our liberties. And so we can stay focused on that while also supporting the bodily autonomy of people to take whatever substance they want to take, give them the ability to be informed consumers with that regard. As I mentioned, being able to test your drugs and know what you're actually taking. Recognizing it's not just a black and white issue. But there's also a lot of other issues like mandatory minimums and the way our prosecutors handle these crimes that could be better done as well. And so nothing is perfect. There's always room to improve, but we're going to keep defending the right of people to have their civil liberties defended, and to support the ability for us to actually have laws and law enforcement to actually protect for that, while fighting against the overcriminalization for crimes that don't have victims and things like the war on drugs.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we were able to go over a bunch of your policy positions and arguments that you would make to other candidates. So I'm going to end this on something a little frivolous, because I was there at the Libertarian Party. I was there for the big speech with former President Trump on Saturday night. When the announcement came down about that, I called it the biggest act of political cuckoldry that I had seen in my years of covering things. What was your guys' opinion on President Trump speaking at the Libertarian Party?
I'll let Mike go first on this one.
I appreciate that. He's letting me go first because my wife, Nancy, said, this doesn't feel right sitting here with this creep. And she says that soon after he started talking. So we stood up and left, and I missed a great chunk of his speech, which I understand did include suggesting that he would like to put a libertarian in his cabinet. Look, good for him for knowing how to pander. But I don't think anyone believes for a moment that this is a guy with a truly libertarian streak. I question even whether he is sufficiently motivated to do the right thing by the American people. I don't think he has a good handle on the Constitution or how to pursue it. And so I'm very pessimistic. I know a lot of people are warm to Donald Trump because he has some anti-establishment instincts. Good for him. But that does not mean that he's a constitutionalist or a libertarian.
Chase?
Yeah, just to play off that. First off, I understand, people might be drawn to his anti-establishment values, but when you understand that he opposes the establishment only for his own benefit and his own gain, as opposed to libertarians who fight for not just their own individual liberty, but the individual liberty of all people, people who aren't like us, people who don't look like us or worship like us or who love like us. So that's the difference between an authoritarian and a libertarian in a nutshell. And Donald Trump is a great example of that. And when he says he's going to put a libertarian on his cabinet, the first question we have to ask is, does he even know what a libertarian is? When he was giving our speech, he said, well, let me quote this great libertarian writer that everyone in this room must know about. No one in the room knew who that was because the only libertarian thing that guy had ever written about was how libertarians need to go ahead and embrace Donald Trump and vote for him. And so Donald Trump doesn't even know what a libertarian is in order to put one on his cabinet. Now, I appreciate him calling out and saying the name Ross Ulbricht and saying he wanted to free Ross Ulbricht. And certainly if he's elected, we're going to hold his feet to the fire on that promise. But I also understand, the reality is that he's also called to put drug dealers to death. He's called to put Edward Snowden to death. And so when it comes to those who seek to have free movement or free information or free transactions, free markets, like people like Edward Snowden and Ross Ulbricht, he hasn't been very kind to them in the past rhetorically. And so we have to trust him as far as we can throw him. And that's not very far when it comes to Donald Trump. So, I appreciate him coming to our convention. He got the libertarian reception he deserved, meaning he got probably the most hostile audience he's ever been in. And yeah, we're going to fight to free Ross.
As somebody who's covered Trump a lot, it was certainly the most raucous crowd that I ever saw him speak in, and by far the drunkest. That speech happened late into the evening, where people were into their cups. Last question here, Chase. If you ran the convention, would you have invited him to speak?
I'll be honest. I was a critic of him coming to our convention. I opposed him coming because I thought there was going to be major brand confusion. I thought there was going to be Donald Trump with a libertarian banner behind him and a group full of cheering sycophants in the room. Happy to say that was thwarted by the will of the libertarian delegates. So I can say I was proven wrong there, and that it did bring quite a bit of media and attention to the party. So I'm guessing the gamble paid off quite well. And I can even admit that, I was a skeptic to that tactic going in. But going out, I'm glad we got to have the attention that having him invited to come lie to our faces, I'm glad it brought the people to the room. And I'm glad it allowed people to show a contrast to what a real libertarian is as opposed to Donald Trump. So, Monday morning quarterbacking, I probably would have. But if you had asked me before the convention, I probably would have said no.
Chase Oliver and Mike ter Maat, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Justin.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, here in Austin, Texas for Dog and Pony Show Audio. If you'd like to email the show, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You want to find us on social media. On TikTok, it is Justin R. Young. Instagram is Justin R. Young. On Twitter, it's Justin R. Young. But if you'd like to see me, my gorgeous, gorgeous face, head on over to youtube.com. Search for Politics. Search for Justin Robert Young, and you'll find us. In fact, youtube.com/@politics is where you need to go. It's great. We got a little budding community there. A little budding community. And I always like to ask a question. In the YouTube comments, what do you think about us just interviewing candidates? I've stayed away from it in the past. Full transparency. Because I know that candidates can't be honest. The conversation that I will have with a political professional or a candidate after they're running is going to be vastly different than when the money's on the line, so to speak. But what do you think? Because at the same time, I do think that there is a clearinghouse for this kind of information. So yes or no? Like it or you don't like it? Hit me up in the comments. youtube.com/@politics. And of course, if you'd like to share the audio podcast with your friends, family, or clergy, it is px3podcast.com. You want to hit me up with a one-time donation, it is paypal.me/payjury, PAYJURY. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash, and you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, the only place that you get our bonus content is TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week, each and every week. And our $10 tier gets you that plus this, your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in our Titanic $10 tier. Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon, the CFP, Gloria Young, my mom, Gray Zone, Peapod, Jay, Sugar Brady, Marcus, DP4, Bungo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, Invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order, Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checker, Sarah Jeannie, Matthew, Dr. G, Neil, his nerdiness Charles, Audrey stole Adler's spot, Darren, Idris, Arslanian, Bluefront, and the Lenina, Berkeley, Stephen, Chad, Zombie, Doc, Matt, Chill, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Dustin, Brad, D-Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah, Jimmy Montana, The Jen, Alo, D, really, Craig, and Andrew. You want your name read at the end of the show? Only one place to do it. Take politics seriously.com. That's it for us this week. We'll be back next week. Debate week. We're going to have a big breakdown of debates big and small. Trump tape, Biden tape. We're going back to 1960. Spoiler alert. The last time that people were in a television studio was 1960. That's where they're going to be on Thursday. So that's where we're going to go back to. Ooh. There's going to be a lot of takes. Spoiler. The reason why Biden might lose on Thursday is the same reason Nixon lost in 1960, and not for the reasons you think. Stay tuned. Till next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more talk about politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss how